the absolute hold that these drugstore makeup products had on us years ago is nuts. I did a video recently talking about formerly viral products that have lost so much buzz, but we used to be like so obsessed with. And I had a few comments to do a drugstore themed version, and I'm like, duh, we have to. So today we are going to pay tribute to the most viral drugstore makeup of the past while we apply some of it to my face. Okay, this actually seemed like the perfect time for me to test this out for the first time. This is the Rimmel Stay Matte Full Coverage Foundation. This is like old, okay? Like a lot of them we're gonna get into were viral a few years back, maybe 5-6 years ago. This just like brings me back. I don't know if I'm gonna like this or not. I've been so intrigued to try this. The texture is truly like moussey. It is like a very different formula than the foundations that we've been getting in the last couple of years. So I just don't even know what to think of this. Normally I would apply this with a sponge, but I think I should start with a brush and then maybe blend out with a sponge. So this is the new brush from Singe. You guys know Angie's brand. This is the F104. So I think we'll start with this and apply it. I feel like these moussey foundations were so big for a while there, especially like when I was in high school, which was, I don't know, 10-15 years ago. The Maybelline like Dream Mousse, oh my gosh, that had such a hold on us, which is so funny because I feel like we all looked like we were rubbing peanut butter on our faces. Like it was not a flattering product, but it was like super popular. Okay, weirdly, this is looking better on the skin than I was expecting. So I kind of like applied it with the brush. I'm gonna try to blend it out with the sponge. I do feel like it kind of set quickly. So I think I'm gonna try to work in like one area at a time. I think this foundation in general, this is like the type of description that was so big probably 10 years ago. The full coverage mattifying foundation. It's so funny because any foundation that's launched recently, I feel like the description for all of them is the same. It is buildable coverage, natural finish. And that's even if they don't have a buildable coverage and a natural finish. I feel like all brands are naming it that because it's like the sweet spot in the middle. If you like a fuller coverage look, you still might be down for that. If you like a lighter coverage look, you know what I mean? It's like it could work for anyone because they're not actually describing it as anything. They're like, the coverage, it's buildable. The finish, it's natural. But I feel like we used to be so obsessed with full coverage matte. Like that was the description people wanted to hear on foundations. And maybe not in a while. But I do think, as I've said in my couple of trend prediction videos that I've posted, I think that the full coverage, or not the full coverage, excuse me. Not the full coverage yet, maybe one day. But I think the matte look, it's on its way back. Maybe not like this though. This reminds me more of an early 2000s matte. It's definitely more flat. I think the more satiny cloud skin type of foundations are what are going to be more popular. I think this is taking me a while to blend out because I have to work in sections. But when I was thinking about the products for this video, it was really taking me down memory lane. So I wanted to share some that it was reminding me of. First of all, if we're thinking primers, I feel like the one that was jumping out to me was the Maybelline Baby Skin. I remember in college, like going through multiples of that. Like I would use it up and repurchase it. Also, the one that we were all so obsessed with, this is so random. Like, do you remember the Nivea Men's Post Shave Balm? Okay, Nikki Tutorials made that one happen. She mentioned that as a primer and like, the internet was obsessed. That was like the most hyped up primer, okay? That was the e.l.f. Halo Glow of the like 2012 era. Everybody was using that. I remember again going through multiple bottles of that. I was convinced like, oh, my makeup lasts so much longer with this on. And maybe it did a little bit because my skin was more hydrated, but that's not like a gripping primer. So it's just funny how popular that became when essentially it's kind of like a moisturizer. Okay, you know what though? This foundation actually looks really nice. I think it was more work than normal to get on the skin just because I think that the texture is so thick and moussey and stiff that you have to work really quickly. But I do think my skin looks really nice. It doesn't look glowy at all, but I wouldn't expect that based on the name. So, I could see myself liking this. I don't know how it's gonna wear though, we'll see. For concealer, this one is not a major throwback, okay? We're cheating a little bit here with the NYX Bear With Me Serum Concealer. I used this in the other video too. I was trying to think of like an older viral concealer, and the problem I was running into with a lot of these products, like I would remember different ones that were viral, but none of them are like cruelty free for me to be able to use. Like I specifically remember the Maybelline Age Rewind with the little ball on the top that you would wind up. I went through so many of those. Also, the other one I was kind of thinking of from the drugstore, this one isn't like as old, but the CoverGirl True Blend I feel like was really big right around like the Shape Tape era, because it was really like we started seeing a lot of drugstore brands doing their own version of Shape Tape, or kind of like their answer to that really high coverage concealer, like the e.l.f. Camo, which actually that could have been a good one for this e.l.f. Camo, because I wouldn't say it's like so old, but even just a couple years ago, like that was the it concealer. I also thought about like the Catrice Camouflage Concealer. I actually didn't really like that one though. I think their newer True Concealer is really good. Okay. So here we go. We're definitely looking matte, but I like it. You know, I like a matte look. For powder, I don't think we need a lot of powder at all right now because this look is so matte. If anything, I'm just gonna powder under the eyes. I don't think the face needs any powder, and that is saying a lot because you know I'm so team powder. But we're gonna take a little bit of banana powder from NYX. Do you remember when banana powder was the go-to? Banana powder was like the pink under eye powder of a few years ago. Okay. This brush is definitely intended to like blend out creams, but I'm gonna use it on a powder weirdly. This is the F02 and it is like a small precision brush. So I'm gonna take this and really pat this NYX banana powder under here. There were like a lot of powders that were coming to mind. The first one, obviously like any banana powder, but specifically like the Ben Nye banana powders, but also the Coty Airspun. Oh my gosh, I remember being so obsessed with that, and like it was kind of hard to find. So I specifically remember wandering through Kmart, like going to Kmart specifically because they were like one of the only places I could find that had it in my town, and I was like looking everywhere for it. I'm pretty sure I used up an entire Coty Airspun, which is so nuts because those powders have so much product in it, like way more than the average powder on the market, like double, triple the amount. It's so funny. Like I can even thinking of that powder, like I can smell it. It was the most heavily scented like loose powder ever. Do you remember, like, did you used to use that powder? Or maybe you still do. Let me know if you still use and like love any of these products. I actually have a lot of like favorites in here that I still use pretty often. Okay, for cheeks, I want to start with highlighter. I know. I feel like normally the order we see is bronzer, blush, highlight, but I want to do a highlighter and then the blush and bronzer to kind of like blend it all together, you know? So this was like an easy one. The Essence Pure Nude highlighters. Do you remember a couple years ago? Like these were everything. Like this wasn't even that long ago. But these are actually really great highlights. I would say the formula reminds me a bit of like the Hourglass ambient lighting highlighters, where it is not a blinding glow. Like not a ton just happened on my cheek just now, you know, but it just kind of livens up the skin without making that reflection that's like kind of artificial looking. Like these, they really are just beautiful highlights. I remember though, like this era, I wasn't so into this type of highlight. I was like, oh no, that's too subtle. I want my highlight to be seen from a mile away. And now, like years later, when I'm not really into highlight in that same way, I feel like I can appreciate this type of formula so much more because now this is what I'm after. I will say though, this shade is like slightly too deep for me, if you can see that. Like I'll make it work, but it is slightly too deep. This shade is called Be My Highlight. It's like, I think from the side, it doesn't look too deep, it looks perfect, but then when you look head on, you can kind of see the stripe of where that was at. But again, that's why we're kind of working backwards here so we can blend together the blush and the bronzer. So for the blush, the one that immediately stood out to me, I mentioned in the other video, it is Milani Luminoso, okay? This blush, you could not escape. I think the Milani baked blushes in general were really popular, but the shade Luminoso is so ingrained in my mind, I will never forget the name of this shade. An alternative I considered This will say is like the runner-up. The CoverGirl Cheeker Blushes. I love this formula as well, but I think for the eyeshadow look I have in mind, I'd rather opt for the peach versus this brighter pink, but I have this in the shade Pink Candy. These I still do like to this day, but just know they're a very, very sheer formula, so you're gonna have to do a lot of building, which sometimes I do like a lot, but just something I want to point out. Okay, let's do Luminoso. I'm pretty sure they like reformulated these slightly in recent years. But I do really like this formula. It definitely is very glowy, but I don't think it's like too shimmery. Again, similar concept to like the Hourglass ones, like any of these baked glowy powders kind of remind me of one another. These also remind me a lot of the Essence ones that launched this year. I would say these are like so similar to the Essence ones, but they're about double the price. So if you want something similar to this and at an even more affordable price point, I would check out the ones from Essence because those are only $6, whereas these are like $11 or $12. Bronzer was hard. Let me know if there's one I'm forgetting that was like the it bronzer from the drugstore. I was kind of considering this, but this brand for me, it's not really drugstore, but it's also not quite high end. But I was thinking of the Take Home the Bronze from the Balm. This was like such a popular one. I also thought about like the Rimmel Stay Matte Bronzer, or even, they don't even make this brand anymore, the NYX Sunny Days Bronzer. I think I went through like 3 of those in my lifetime, but I decided let's go with e.l.f. their Primer Infused Bronzer. This one definitely not as old as some of the others, but this was a huge favorite of mine for a while now. I have the shade Forever Sunkissed, and as you can see, I do have pan in this bronzer. Okay, that was maybe way too much, but I'm gonna try to blend that in. Can I save this? We'll see. It is interesting to try some of my like older favorites more recently, and when I notice the difference in the formula, I'm like, is it because this is old and the formula is like not quite working the same? Or is it because we've had so many better launches since then that I'm used to like a different quality now and this wouldn't seem as nice compared to what I used to love? Did I say that backwards? You know what I mean. I also think the style of makeup that I used to really love looks a lot different than what I wear for the most part these days. This is my trick though. You saw we kind of had a bronzer disaster going on. Take the sponge that we originally used for foundation. It's still gonna have a little bit of foundation left in it, and just kind of like tap over that edge. You probably know that trick, but if you haven't tried that, I swear it'll like save the day. You know what though, just for fun, just to be like historically accurate, if you will, I think we need to do a contour of it because contour was so big in this time. So let's take the Take Home the Bronze. Even though it's not quite high end, we're still gonna, or not quite drugstore, it's kind of like in the middle between drugstore and high end. I remember this making such a great contour because the whole concept for this line was that it was anti-orange. It wasn't gonna pull orange. It was like a very neutral, like cool leaning tone. So I'm just gonna try to put a little bit of this under my cheek. It's also interesting to watch like the difference in placement over the years because this used to be a much more common place for people to put their contour like much lower, kind of in the hollow of the cheeks. Whereas in the last few years, we've seen a big shift for people moving their contour up much higher on the face. Whereas maybe 6-7 years ago, we were putting it here to kind of emphasize where that shadow is. And now people are more concerned with like the lifting effect versus the contoured effect. Like, you know, they're kind of two different looks. This contoured one looks more chiseled, whereas the higher placement looks more lifted. For my eyes, there were a couple that I considered, and there wasn't necessarily a palette standing out to me except for maybe like the Milani ones. Do you remember when those were super popular? Or the cream shadow sticks from NYX. I really considered those because I feel like when I was in high school, those were everything, like the NYX jumbo eye pencils. But there's this one shade from NYX that used to be so popular. It is called Mermaid, and then it went viral again a couple of years back. It's this really beautiful like duochromatic green. So I want to incorporate this, but I also want to use a Colourpop Super Shock shadow. And I don't think the Super Shock shadows have necessarily like lost their popularity. People still use them, but they used to be everything. Like those were just so prominent. Like around a decade ago, you would see every tutorial using a Colourpop Super Shock for like the main color on the lid. You were seeing like Super Shock shadow collection videos. We really loved those. Okay, I just laid down a primer. This is the Ulta Beauty Matte Eyelid Primer. And then I'm gonna take a little bit of that same bronzer and just run it through the crease so that we have something laid down before I go in with these shimmer shades. So the Colourpop Super Shock shadow that I have is called Ladybird, and this is like such a perfect top coat shade. So I almost think I'm gonna try to do some sort of combination with the green, but then Ladybird on top. So let's start off with Mermaid. And I think this was like very recently discontinued unless I'm wrong. But I think this applies best with your finger. So I'm gonna take this and just kind of tap it along the lid and then go back to the brush I put the bronzer on with just to kind of blend that out. I really loved using this shade as like an inner corner or like a center of the lid, like some sort of a fun colorful pop without being like too bright. Okay, we've got some green, it's looking cute. Now let's take Ladybird, and I think I just want to take like the tiniest bit and try to tap it over to get more of like a scattered glitter effect. I need to like really break this shade out for winter when I'm like wanting to do, or not even winter, but like holiday time. Now that I'm really wanting to do these like super glittery fun eye looks, I love those together. It looks so pretty and shimmery. And before I do mascara, I want to do my setting spray before I like put the mascara on. So who remembers the Pixie Glow Mist? This like 8 years ago was everything. Was it 8 years ago? Not that long ago. Was it? How long ago would you say this was like really big? I feel like it was 2017, 2018, so maybe not quite 8 years ago, but let's apply some. This was like, first you would do all your like super matte like powder products, and then we would drench ourselves in a setting spray to kind of like bring the skin back to life. Whereas, oh, I got that all over my mirror. Whereas now I feel like we kind of see the opposite. We see people like really starting with the dewy products and then maybe like doing some specific targeting with more mattifying powders to kind of lock it in. So a very opposite technique from what was really trendy 7-8 years ago. It's funny too because I really can't remember the last time I've used a setting spray. Maybe if I need my makeup to last like all day, especially in the summer months, I will grab for like my Urban Decay all-nighter. But I feel like as a category, setting spray used to be really big in makeup, and I don't see them as popular or really even talked about as much as they were like 7 or 8 years ago. Also, for mascara, the main one that was standing out to me, I was like, the CoverGirl Lash Blast, you know? What? Or like Maybelline Great Lash, like the pink and green one. Oh my gosh. That's another one I remember going through multiples of when I was a kid. Funny enough though, I didn't think that one was that good. I know it was like so popular. I think it was so popular because it was like the most affordable mascara, but I don't remember liking it that much. There's really only one option for lips here, okay? And it is obviously the NYX Soft Matte Lip Creams. We have to use this, but first, we'll do a little lip liner. This is from Rimmel. This is their Lasting Finish lip liner, which I'm pretty sure is actually new, but I remember their lip liners like back in the day being so popular. And this is the shade Cappuccino. Okay, so now that we have that, the shade that had the biggest hold on all of us was definitely London. And what I really like about London in particular is that I feel like it goes with any lip liner. I don't really love this shade on its own, but I love it with a lip liner because this formula isn't like the most opaque, which I think is a pro for it because it really effortlessly blends in with the lip liner. And you can kind of have like your custom shade. I feel like these were big before liquid lipsticks even got super big. What do we think? What do you think I was missing? What were the other super popular drugstore products from a few years back? I'm interested to hear your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will go ahead and see you in my next one. Bye.